I think going through the most extreme anxiety and worries that you can go through, and once you come out the other end of that, you're like, oh, well, half this stuff doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. If I'm worried about going to speak to, Jane Doe about X, Y, and Z, it's not going to really, be detrimental to me if I stutter or if I mess up or things like that. The best way to describe it is almost like a little, sort of like a superpower when it comes to little trivial things. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to the next 5 years, mate, because having seen DPDR in the rearview mirror, it just becomes a sort of thing where you're just back into the normality of life, and it's beautiful.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, author of the Depersonalization Manual, and today we're doing a follow-up interview with someone we've spoken to before to discuss life after depersonalization and long-term DPDR recovery. So today I'm speaking with Keelan Murray from Belfast, Ireland. Now, most of you will already have seen Keelan's first interview, which we did back in May of 2023. If you haven't seen it, I'll link to it in the video description, so check it out when you get a chance. But just to recap, Keelan is now 26 years old. His first experience with DPDR came about after a panic attack during a trip to Liverpool. What followed was an intense battle with daily panic attacks, which resulted in Keelan feeling like he was a floating head, disconnected and like a ghost. Over the next 16 months, Keelan frantically searched for a solution, worried that the condition might be permanent or that he might be going crazy. Fortunately, he made a complete recovery, which we discussed in the first interview. But I was thrilled when Keelan emailed me recently to say, quote, "I just want to thank you again for everything that you're doing. I've stayed fully recovered, and even though I endured some stressful times since we last spoke, DPDR was never in the picture." End quote. I was delighted to hear this. I noted that it's now been about 2 years since Keelan fully recovered, and he has kindly agreed to do a follow-up interview to discuss what long-term life after depersonalization is really like. Keelan, you're very welcome back to the channel. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me back on, Sean. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, you too, man. Pleasure. So last time we spoke was May of last year?
Yeah, time has just sort of completely flew by. I think the last time we spoke, I had moved house and then got a puppy as well.
That's right.
Yeah, he is no longer a puppy. He is massive. He's about, I think the last time we got him weighed was about 4.5 stone, 5 stone there. So a big guy. Yeah.
What breed is he?
So he is, whenever we first got him, I wasn't really quite sure sort of what breed he was. So we took him back up to the farm that we got him from, and we've seen the mum. And the mum was a black lab and a German Shepherd mix. And then we've seen the dad, who was like a greyhound. So if you try and picture this sort of like a black lab, German Shepherd, greyhound, and just sort of squish them together, he looks like that. But he's very tall and very big.
and presumably likes to do a lot of running.
Yeah, it's actually not too bad because he has a sort of like greyhound stamina where he would run in and out for 10 minutes and then sleep for 4 hours. So it's fantastic.
Nice. That's great to hear. So Keelan, can you give us a quick catch up on how life has been last year? Because last time we spoke, you were finished with your recovery. Life was back on track. And things were looking up. So give us a quick recap on how things have been.
Yeah, 100%. So whenever we last spoke, I moved house. We were just like sort of renting a house at that time, and then within that last year, so I think in March this year, I actually bought my first house. So that's why the background's maybe a little bit different. It's very plain and white, but. Bought that just to be close to my grandfather and grandmother as well, because I moved a little bit further away from them whenever I rented, and just to come back to live near them and sort of look after them when they need and stuff, And then obviously, that was just, the stress of moving and things like that. And then unfortunately recently as well, I'm sort of going through a breakup at the minute too, which again is quite stressful and stuff, sort of having to look after a big dog like Kobe on my own. But it's just with the different sort of techniques and the different sort of methods that I've sort of learned on how to A, look after my mental health, and B, to ensure that I don't sort of go into that spiral of DP again. I was able to manage it and things, But I think in short, sort of life has ups and downs, which is what I'm experiencing at the minute, but that's completely normal, which I would take any other day compared to the period of DP that I went through before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that people ask me about all the time, and you often see in the comments of the videos, I'm sure in your interview as well, but people say, like, when you recover, does does anxiety ever appear again? I mean, I think people kind of make the mistake of thinking that, like, after recovery from any anxiety-based condition, that, like, stress isn't going to be a part of your life. But, like, of course it is. You're a human being. You're going to have, like, stressful times and ups and downs. But that doesn't mean that it's going to, trigger an anxiety-based condition, or that you're somehow going to get back to square one if you go through a difficult time. Because, as I always say to people, you can't get back to square one. Like, square one was when this happened, and you had no idea what these symptoms were, or what was going on, or that there was even a word to describe it.
Yeah, completely. Like, I think one of the main things for me that helped with recovery was knowledge and learning actually what DP was. Because, again, like many other people, when I first experienced it, and same as yourself as well, you think that something drastically bad is happening. You think that you maybe have, like, I remember in my instance, I thought I had a brain tumor, and then I just thought, I'd famously had a chuckle about it, that my vision was going. I thought my vision went, and
Yes,
went to the
yes.
optometrist 3 times. But it's learning the knowledge about that, and as you say, once you know that, once you understand what that is, you can't go back to square one, because you already have that base there, that you know what's happening whenever stress or if DP ever arises ever again,
Yeah, certainly. So with the benefit of 2 years distance, Anna, Keelan, just broadly speaking, what are your thoughts on DPDR with this kind of added perspective of time and distance with us? Just looking back on the experience, what do you think of it now?
Yeah, like, it certainly makes sense as to why it happened to me, because again, it was during the period of COVID and stuff like that. And I remember the first instance where I had that panic attack was going over to Liverpool, 2 hours sleep, about a litre of coffee. It was just inevitable that was going to happen. But like, the way my sort of brain works is I try to, like, overanalyze a lot of things and try to make sense of things where I don't find sense in them, if that makes sense. So whenever I started to feel this way, I straight away thought the, like, worst case doomsday scenario. But looking back on it now, it's like I wish I had that knowledge that I have now that I didn't have back then. But it's like, ultimately, like, when I first started to experience it, I just thought it was this terrible, horrible thing that had happened to me. Whereas it's part of human nature. It's the way that we're sort of built, is this defense mechanism. So I don't look back at it as a negative. In fact, and I think we'll sort of explore it a bit later on, it's actually made me change a few things in my life for a net positive. So this way, now that I went through that, recovered, and I understand how to tackle my mental health and improve it and stay, consistent, has held me in better state for the rest of my life.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I certainly would have had a similar experience, and thinking about the condition in very practical terms, and understanding that it is actually a defense mechanism, and that as terrifying as it feels when you're going through it, that when you recover, and you can and will recover, you will likely look back on this with the same in the same context as you would if you had, like, a couple of weeks of heart palpitations, or if you had a couple of weeks of, like, shoulder tension. You just look back at it, and I mean, from my perspective, it's like, well, that's a thing that happened. It was very scary when it happened, but now that I know why it happened, and I know that each one of these symptoms has a simple underlying reason for it, there is no reason for me to categorize it as something like frightening or terrifying. It was literally my body trying to protect itself at a time that it didn't need to be doing it. It was just a fire alarm going off when there was no fire,
Yeah.
So how is your perspective on mental health changed? I think you just referred to this briefly, Keelan, but, like, in terms of self-care and maybe habits and things, has anything changed in big or small terms for you in that sense?
Like, I think if I sort of compare myself to who I am now than like before I had even that first panic attack. I mean, you obviously hear things about mental health and things like that, but I never really took it on board as to what mine was like. I've done a lot of some would say sort of soul searching. Like for example, I actually recently went to see like a therapist. I'm still going to one, but not for anything sort of severe. It's just to sort of collect these sort of tools in my arsenal, say, just to manage my mental health and make sure that I'm doing the right things. Because I know, obviously, from previous experience, that if I am too stressed and I am, completely freaking out about things, and I am susceptible to the likes of this, and yeah, I just think that I'm doing things now that I would never have done. Like, say, for example, like I started going to like a local spa, just do like the sauna and ice bath and things, which I think, by the way, man, if you've never done one, ice bath, worst 3 minutes of your life, but if you're great for it. Yeah, because I remember there was a time, I can't remember an exact date, but I remember waking up and it was sort of in that sort of lull period where I'd started to recover a little bit, but it wasn't sort of fully recovered. And I remember there was a night I had like really bad sleep. I was sort of, tossing, turning, and I woke up and that DP was there. But instead of sort of freaking out about it and worrying about it, I took myself off to that spa and just done like an ice bath and tried to, relax myself and bring myself back down. And I felt great after it, So just if that sort of thing ever happens again, I have those sort of things that I like to do, whether it's that or, go for a walk with the dog. Well, he's walking me, but, or, go to the gym, things like that. I know we touched on that before, but I definitely notice a difference where if I don't do those things, I feel 10 times worse than if I actually do those things in the week, So yeah, it's really opened my eyes in a sort of mental health aspect for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it interesting how, we interpret these symptoms differently? So like 75% of people will experience the feelings of DPDR at some point in their lives. It is perfectly normal to experience this briefly from time to time. If you're going through intense stress or like, even if you're jet lagged, you'll experience, it's very likely to experience like brief feelings of DPDR. But interpreting them in a catastrophic sense is what turns them into an ongoing condition. But then for most people, they just notice it and they get back to doing what they were doing and it just fades away in the same way that your muscles relax and your heart rate gets back to normal. But, isn't it interesting how, in the rare times when we might feel under such an amount of stress that it causes physical symptoms like muscle tension, heart palpitations, and physical symptoms or mental symptoms like maybe racing thoughts and low level feelings of DPDR, that you say, okay, well, that's my cue to hit the spa. That's my cue to go and relax myself, because that's the correct interpretation. It's your body telling you you're under a bit too much stress at the moment. You need to take your foot off the pedal a little bit. And when you interpret it in that way, that's what gives your body and brain the permission to let these feelings go. As opposed to the first time it happened for me anyway, when I noticed these things and I thought, oh, I must be going crazy. I must have damaged my brain somehow, An example I always like to give is like, think of two people who go to work one morning and they each drink 3 or 4 cups of coffee and they're about to do a presentation, and then they notice that their hearts are beating quite quickly. And one person says, well, I better switch to decaf for the day. And the other person thinks, I'm having a heart attack, I'm going to die. And they freak out and they run out of the building, they call an ambulance rushes them to the hospital, and the doctor says, you're not having a heart attack, your heart was racing, it's a panic attack. That's all. The exact same experience, the exact same symptom, but what one interpreted in a practical manner and the other interpreted in a catastrophic manner, leading to an intense series of or an intense panic attack, and repeatedly and a hyper awareness of that symptom that causes it to persist for much longer than it needs to do.
Yeah, it's so like learning about it has been so like eye-opening how like our thoughts and our feelings can influence the way we like perceive things, and makes our body do different things. Like that example you just said there, where obviously if the guy that knows and catches it on the blood about switching to decaf because he's had too much coffee, or the guy running out of the building. The only difference is the way that they're sort of perceiving things.
Yeah.
And once you sort of, again, it's more like it's like habitual, because I was like that for so long. When I had the heart palpitations, I thought it was a heart attack, or whenever I had DP, I thought it was just me going crazy. It was just crazy, man. And then now, obviously looking back on it, and I'm not going to say I regret not getting it so soon, because then if it changed the course of how I went through things, then I wouldn't be where I am today. You know what I mean? Yeah, man, it's crazy. And just coming out of this as well, like learning more about how like the biology of how the brain works is so fascinating. It really, really is how powerful the tool that we have, and some of us, obviously what I did before, sort of take it for granted.
Certainly. And also, I mean, there's, for me as well, I know you referred to this earlier, Keelan, but for me as well, I have certain practices I do each day that can keep me on an even keel. Because I do tend to be quite an introspective person. I tend to be if there's a problem that needs to be solved, I tend not to be able to like look away until I fix it. And if that means like 3 nights of frantic researching on the internet, yeah, it's even the other day. I'm in Berlin at the moment, and I have a camera. I did take a lot of photographs, and my camera had a problem. The shutter button wasn't working properly, and I went to about 5 different places on different parts of Berlin. I went to the 3 main camera shops. I went to 2 hardware stores. Like, I know, and talked to Chat GPT. I was on YouTube trying to find it. I had to find the solution, and like eventually I did. Thank goodness. But like the idea of like just going back to the apartment, putting the camera down, and waiting a day or two. Nah, I can't do that. I can't do that.
Needs to be immediate. Yeah,
it needs to be immediate, or I won't sleep. And it's not like it wasn't going to be a massive problem, but I had to get it fixed. But if I apply that same kind of like problem solving, frantic kind of methodology to my own mental health, then it becomes an issue. But if I if I have the routine of like I take a cold shower in the mornings, meditation, exercise, and doing some creative work, and the deal is that if I do those things, I'm going to have a great day. That's kind of the deal, But these are things that I certainly would have taken for granted before my experience with anxiety,
Yeah, I think with me as well, like the meditation things. I remember from the last time speaking with you, you're big on that. I've recently started to try it, and what I found now, I don't know how helpful this will be for everybody, but I find that if I do meditation for a long period of time, like maybe 5 to 10 minutes, when I open my eyes again, I sort of get that sensation of DP very briefly, where I sort of start to come back into my body almost and be like, oh, flip here, yeah, right, okay, this is where I am, this is what I have to do. And I think doing that has actually weirdly made me realize that the sensations that I went through were more manageable than I thought they were. It's that sort of exposure therapy aspect of it as well. I've done that now, and I'm trying to do it a little bit more often, doing that going forward. But I find that's been very, very helpful. And I was never a big meditation guy before.
Yeah. And it's interesting how it's, like intense meditation can, creates that feeling of kind of almost like being a trance-like state, or kind of a dream-like state at times. But like this is a normal human thing to experience. Like there's nothing kind of harmful or dangerous about it. But when we experience it in terms of like a meditative state, we just think, well, this is really lovely. If you experience it while you're getting chased by a grizzly bear, you wouldn't think twice about it, because that's part of your fight or flight response. But if you experience it while you're on a ferry to Liverpool, then you think, well, there's no reason for this to be happening, or in Liverpool, or having traveled, or just even if you're at home, eating dinner. Then you think, well, there's no reason for this to be happening, so something is wrong. This is coming from beside me. I must be going crazy, my brain is damaged somehow. And then we start questioning it, becoming phobic of it, and then repeatedly checking in on it, and it turns into the feedback that becomes the condition. The context of it is so important. I think that's one of the beautiful things of recovery, is that it gives you the context to understand it, that prevents it from ever becoming a problem again. That is you have that experience under your belt, and as I said earlier, you can't get back to square one, because you will never be in a position in your life again where you don't understand what these feelings are and what this condition is. Has dealing with with day-to-day anxieties become any different for you, Keelan, or even the kind of bigger life changes that you've been through in the meantime? Has that changed at all for you, or is it much the same?
It's so strange. Like, see trivial things like the likes of like with my job and stuff. I have to like regularly like talk to people I've never met before, or give presentations and things like that. It's almost weirdly like a superpower, where like that stuff does not bother me in the slightest anymore. It's brilliant. Like it's just like water off a duck's back. It's so strange. Whereas before I would have been quite worried about that sort of stuff. But I think going through the most extreme anxiety and worries that you can go through, and once you come out the other end of that, you're like, oh well, half this stuff doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. If I'm worried about going to speak to, G and Doe about X, Y, and Z, it's not going to really, be detrimental to me if I stutter or if I mess up or things like that. The best way to describe it is almost like sort of like a superpower when it comes to little trivial things. I think when it comes to some more of the bigger stresses and stuff, I think just going back to what we touched on before, I think obviously going through like a couple of stressful things at the minute in my life, and just sort of being a little bit more self-reflective and sort of checking in on myself as I'm going along. If I do feel like I'm getting a little bit too stressed, then I use one of my sort of, I don't want to say coping mechanisms, but my little sort of tools in my little toolbox, say. But yeah, it's like, whereas before I would never have done that. I would have just sort of, plowed on, worry about it later. And then, but it being in that mindset is what led to me having the sort of the DPDR experience. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly like, I do think ultimately it's changed me for the better, which is a weird thing to say, because I know, like, I was the sort of person, that was frantically looking at your videos when I was going through the worst of it. And then I was seeing these comments, seeing you say the same thing about, like, you will get back to normal and it will be better, and you just don't believe it. But once you actually do get through it, you're like, good old Sean was correct. It's 100% the truth. And I never believed it, but then now that I'm actually experiencing it, I'm like, shit, like it hasn't just come from, it has come from a lot of hard work. Like, it hasn't been, easy in the slightest, but it's putting in that work and getting the results. And then it just becomes a sort of thing where you're just back into the normality of life, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And something you mentioned earlier as well, Keelan, I thought was very apt, was the idea of building up tools in your arsenal. I find for me is like I'll have times where I will explore new avenues of psychology or mental health. Like so recently, I've been reading a lot about loving kindness meditation in Buddhism, which is just kind of like saying, is focusing a meditation on your own happiness. So it's like, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live with ease, may I be free from harm, and then focusing that onto other people, maybe difficult people in your life, difficult situations in your life. And it's a really effective way to deal with like feelings of, shame, or deal with feelings of frustration or whatever. But it's another tool in the arsenal. It's something else to have in the toolbox, And I think it's very liberating to find that there's all these different things that you can use to put a name onto these experiences and to be able to deal with them. Because in a way, it changes the experience from being something that is very kind of nebulous and it feels kind of like overwhelming. It's just like being in a storm. And then when you say, okay, there's these tools to deal with it, it's not going to switch it off immediately, but there are ways to mitigate these feelings. And you take that and you go, okay, cool. So if in the future I'm experiencing this particular difficulty, I can open the toolbox, take this out and use it. And just knowing that makes that particular frustration or difficult experience so much more manageable. Because it's not this kind of nameless monolith of a thing that you just had, like, fingers crossed it doesn't come back. It's like, no, this has a name. This is common. Most people experience it. Here's a little tool to help you address it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
like an example of that would be, like, say if I ever get like a random, chest pain, maybe from like a wee pulled muscle or something like that, and if I find myself going through that sort of loophole in my mind again of being like, oh, here, I know we've got these, I know you got this test done on your heart and this done, but what about this and what about that? If I ever find myself going through that again, I go straight to the gym or go out and really push myself with a workout. And then that way I can sort of turn back and say to myself, be like, well, I proved it wrong. You know what I mean? And then it's a net benefit because I just get fitter and feel better throughout the rest of the day there. But yeah, having that and being able to do that is a blessing in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know it's something we talked about in the first interview as well, Keelan, but like the value of exercise is just, I mean, it is worth its weight in gold. I always say to people on the coaching sessions, like, I mean, look, exercise is your secret weapon. If you were never really into exercise before, now is your chance, because this just like it is just it's a list of ways to address and defeat anxiety combined into one activity, because you're socializing, there's a routine involved in it, you feel better, you look better, you're socializing with people, it releases endorphins afterwards, it improves your sleep patterns, which contributes to anxiety reduction. It is absolutely invaluable, exercise as part of recovery from an anxiety-based condition. And the beauty of it is, and this happened to me, I was never really into exercise or the gym before I got anxiety DPDR, and a friend of mine at the time saw that something bad was happening to me and didn't know what to, and my buddy was like, get Sean down to the gym. And I was like, I'm not going down the gym. Like, he said, you're coming down the gym. We went down the gym. He signed me up, and I started going, and I have never stopped going to the gym. It is like, it's the best thing to have, like, and no matter what is happening, no matter how, like, no matter the emotional weather of your life, you can always go and run and lift weights, and you will feel better afterwards. That's a guarantee. And what a beautiful thing to have, like,
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's a very good friend that you have, that he done that for you.
Yeah.
That's a very good friend.
Yeah.
And but I think people get this sort of misconception about when we say like exercise in the gym. Like, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be training for a marathon or anything like that. It's just do enough to where you feel uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? Where, like, say you don't have to be lifting a heavy weight and stuff, just enough you go like, oh, here, this is taking some considerable effort, and then that way you get the sort of, as you say, the endorphins and things like that. But I couldn't picture my life without doing that. I'm blessed to be able to actually, that I don't have any, ailments or anything to prevent me from doing that, touch wood. But having, like, being able to do that any day I want is really a blessing. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, certainly. So Keelan, looking back over your time since recovery, and particularly in the time, like, right after, like during your recovery or right after, do you have a memory of something that you got back to doing, or something that you thought you wouldn't be able to do again? Or what's your favorite memory about being fully recovered?
I remember there was a time when I could not drive. Like, I just couldn't. Like, I think one of the worst panic attacks I ever had. I think I actually said on the interview that we had the last time, it was actually my lowest point, where I literally almost crashed my car. I literally could not keep driving because it was that bad. Now I just love getting out and going for a drive, driving, commuting to work if I need to and stuff like that. I just love doing that. It's not the most glamorous thing, but whenever you go through a period of like you're dreading having to sit there with your own thoughts for how many minutes it is you're driving, that was the hardest thing for me. Because I remember when, like, in my previous job, I had to drive maybe like half an hour each way every day, and I have to get up and sit there with my own ruminating thoughts in the morning, and then when I'm going home, I just find it so difficult. And that would lead to, I can't remember, I couldn't tell you how many panic attacks I have just sitting in the car. And then now I just sort of get in, a little bit of songs on, a wee bit of Celine Dion if I'm feeling up for it.
Oh, oh, oh! You're preaching to the choir here, buddy. Well, Celine is my spirit animal. Like,
Yeah, it's my little pet secret.
that's for you. That's for YouTube. Like, we're both saying it out loud.
I didn't say, cut it out. Cut it out.
What would you say to people who doubt that full recovery is possible? And I know that we're both people who at one point or another absolutely doubted that full recovery was possible. Even when we saw all the comments on YouTube, all the recovery stories, you always think, yeah, but that's not me. I don't think I can do it.
Yeah, like, I remember whenever I first started to go through it, I was on the DPDR subreddit for a long time, and that is just not helpful in the slightest. Like, I remember I actually recently went back on it there, like, I don't know, it must have been like a lot of months ago to actually see what was being posted and stuff. And it's just a sea of negativity, whereas the key to recovery is knowledge and positivity. That's how you're going to get over this thing. If you're constantly sort of being negative and you're putting yourself down and then saying that, like, you can never do this or never do that, then that's just beating the anxiety. When you tell yourself you can't do something and then you have to go and try and do it, you're going to fall apart. Like for me, the big thing was trying to go on planes. Like, I could not fly. Like, the reason I say we got the ferry over to Liverpool is because I was dead scared of flying. I still, like, my relationship with flying now isn't the best, but I still sort of push myself through it to know that I can. But being able to say that you're fully recovered is really a blessing because you have put work into it, and it was doing the things that I didn't want to do, which led to that. Like, I know we touched on it before, but my big thing was about my heart, where I thought I was going to have a heart attack because I had these pains and this pain and stuff. I thought I was going to pass out and things like that. But whenever I first started to touch on exercise again, whenever I first started to do heavy, like, demanding exercise, is when I started to feel the anxiety levels decrease, and then the DP came with it. It decreased too. Because previously it was going in and, like, maybe doing 5 or 10 minutes and then feeling like a little, palpitation and being like, nope, right, that's it, I'm going home. But yeah, it's dependent on what your anxiety actually is. Because if your anxiety is to do exactly with the DP, then adding in again those tools to your toolbox should help. Or if you were like me, where it's to do with the heart or things like that, then doing that exposure therapy of, hard exercise, looking after yourself, just things like that. It will happen, and it won't be. It won't be just you wake up all of a sudden and it's completely gone and you're like, oh, here, brilliant, let's go do whatever. It'll be, well, in my case anyway, it was quite gradual, where, like, there would be one day where I had maybe a few hours and saying, great. And then me being me was like, oh, here, it's done now, I'm back to normal. But then it just came back maybe like a few hours later when I sort of felt myself going through the thought patterns again. But it comes to a time where you're just caught up in the normality and the day-to-day of life, where you sit back and think, I haven't thought about DP in weeks, months at a time. It's really just like that. But again, it's through keeping yourself busy, doing things that benefit your mental health as well. It's really, really paramount.
Yeah, certainly. And yeah, with the Reddit forums, I mean, I certainly would have been spent a lot of time on DPDR forums back in the day as well. And yeah, you're right. There's a lot of, I mean, there's some great stuff on there. There's some really, really positive stuff, but there is a lot of negativity, there's a lot of kind of people attacking each other as well and saying, you haven't really recovered, or yours is different from mine, or, which, when you see that and you're at a place where you're trying to stop thinking about it yourself or train yourself away from it, it could be very counterproductive. But I will say though that I recognize where those folks are coming from as well. I see all that frustration and negativity, but it is coming from a place of pain, and it's coming from a place of just thinking that like I can't get out of this, and having to rationalize that by saying that mine is different from yours, or and I recognize that because I was that person for a long time. I haunted those forums, and I got into every conversation, and because you're thinking as well, like, this is the thing to do. Like, if I research this consistently enough, I will find a solution. I'll find some Reddit post. I'll find some post in a Facebook group or something that'll just, I'll read it and it'll go, that's it, and it clicks, and the whole thing lifts. But then we just spend hours and hours each day on these forums, and then wonder why that night we can't stop thinking about DPDR.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a frustrating cycle, but it is important to get out of it. Out of curiosity, Keelan, do you talk about your recovery to people? Do you speak to people about your time with the condition, or is it something that you're not comfortable with doing?
I remember it must have been about 2 years ago or so, when I was still sort of, I don't remember an exact date, but it was just before I started to really feel the benefits of recovery. And one of the big things I was worrying about for some strange reason was people finding out that I was struggling and things like that. And I remember reaching out to my sort of immediate close circle of people and just telling them, because a big fear for me was then finding out for some reason or whatever. But part of my recovery was just going, right, okay, I'll just tell them then, because they're my friends, the people that I've respected. And man, the amount of people that have told me that they experienced a similar thing has been crazy. I sort of told them about, like, the panic attacks, and then the sort of starting to feel like, this dissociation and things like that. And I would say, like, I mean, I remember off my top of my head, 3 people of my immediate circle that had told me that they experienced this dissociation before, multiple times, and it's just, once you realize that, you're like, oh, here, like, it's more common than you think. Because when you first initially start to feel like it, you feel like you're like an outlier. You feel like you're this one-of-a-kind case where it can't sort of be fixed, and you've done something horrible to your brain, where it is really, really, really common. Even so common that people that I never knew had it before did go through it. And maybe they didn't, maybe they're a different sort of makeup to me, where I sort of researched it and obsessed over it. Maybe they realized what it was and let it, move on. But yeah, that's the way. And people were very, very sort of compassionate and understanding with it as well. Because I think for guys especially, like males, it's quite sort of hard to talk about mental health as well, because there's these sort of age-old, forgetting the word now,
Like stereotypes.
Stereotypes, yeah, not the stereotypes. Like these age-old stereotypes where you have to be, strong, independent. You have to think about your feelings and stuff like that. Whereas that's so sort of outdated. Where, like, it wasn't. Whenever I was going through all this, it wasn't a case of me, feeling sorry for myself, or things like that. It was completely. I felt like it was sort of against my will that I was experiencing these thoughts and feelings. So I didn't have control of them. I couldn't stop them. And just that sort of old outdated stereotype, especially I think for guys as well, is just very, very outdated. And it was hard to sort of open up as well. But I think now that I have, it's a lot, like, it's like a weight off my shoulders, and it's I think it's slowly within cultural norms anyway. I think it's slowly changing, that the likes of mental health and things are being discussed and spoken about a lot more, because people are starting to realize that it can happen to anybody. You don't have to be, going through a tough time to experience these things. They can just be the daily stressors of life. It could be, a major event in life, be it like, like a death or a birth, or even things like that. Your whole mental health into a tailspin, and you just don't even recognize it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that people say to me all the time, is that they say, I had a panic attack and I've never had anxiety before. Like, this has never happened before. And that's terrifying. Like, I wasn't going through anything bad. There was no, it just happened. I had a panic attack. And the thing is that that's why a panic attack is a panic attack. You know, if the house was on fire and you had a panic attack, then you wouldn't even call it a panic attack. Like the scariest thing about a panic attack is that it seems to be happening for no reason. And we always assume that, like, well, I haven't had any history of panic attacks, but there's always the first one. You know, it's all the stuff that makes it feel more frightening. It feels like it doesn't have a context or an explanation. So if it's coming from out of nowhere, then how can I ever deal with it? But part of recovery is contextualizing it properly and saying, okay, even if I wasn't experiencing like huge anxiety at the time, I can still have a panic attack, you know? And there are so many different reasons that can cause it, but it doesn't make me weak. And it certainly doesn't mean that I can't recover from it. And also the thing about speaking to other people about it, Keelan, is I think you're absolutely right. For me, for years, even after I wrote the book, I didn't speak to people about it at all. I mean, I would have never posted about it on social media and things like that, or, you know, even when I meet new people, I wouldn't ever really talk about it. And then the BBC did an interview with me, and of course everyone knew about it after that. So I resolved to just be much more open about it. And I don't think I've ever come across somebody who, when I said it to them, they were just like, "Oh, what's that like?" Because when you say like, when I was in my mid-20s, I had a very, very crippling experience with anxiety that lasted for 2 years. Like, everyone knows anxiety. Everyone knows it. Most people will recognize what a panic attack is. Everyone will recognize like this. And then when you describe depersonalization, most people will go, oh, I've had that. Like, you know, and maybe not as a chronic condition, but some people, yes, they'll have it as a chronic condition. But it's the thing of like kind of hiding it away or not wanting to verbalize this that kind of empowers it as well. And when we just put it out into the open and say, I had this thing for 2 years, it was really difficult, but I got out of it and I'm actually stronger for it. It contributes to taking the sort of the power of like this being some mysterious monolithic thing away. It's just anxiety, but vocalizing it and verbalizing it normalizes it. And it's great. It's great to see that is happening culturally, as well as individually.
Yeah, I just wish that, you know, there was more knowledge about it, especially in the medical field. Like, because I remember speaking to you before about how I went to the doctor. I told him like my symptoms and stuff, and he was like, "Oh yes, anxiety, but it might be depression as well. So like, have put me on like antidepressants, and they did not work at all." But strangely enough, actually, the therapist that I'm going to see at the minute, I actually mentioned to her about the sort of experience that I had, and she like sort of set up a little bit. She was like, "I wrote my thesis on depersonalization," and I was like,
"No way.
Get out of town." I was like, "No way." And we spent ages talking about it and stuff, and I was like, "You're the first person I've ever spoken to, or from like a medical field, that understands what this is." And she had done it like maybe like 15, 20 years ago or something like that. But I was like, this is like a eureka moment that like finally someone has actually, you know, read about it. And I remember she was saying it was so fascinating to her how the brain can sort of do this and things. And she says, and I've never experienced it before. So she was picking my brain for me to say how it felt and things like that. But I mean, man, I think if the main thing that I wish would sort of happen in the future is for this to be more known of and aware about, you know, like, because I never heard of it before I started to experience it. But if it was commonplace and people knew what it was, then DPDR wouldn't really be a thing, that the disorder wouldn't be a thing if people understood what it is when it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the example I always like to give is if you have a panic attack and you develop claustrophobia, for example, and you are suddenly afraid of small spaces, you can't get into an elevator, you can't get into your car, you can't get into a bus, can't get out the subway, but you've never heard of the word claustrophobia. What's that going to feel like? You're going to think that you're
Yeah.
going crazy because you don't have a context for it. And if you go to your doctor, the doctor says, well, that's just anxiety. Okay, that's part of the solution. That's part of the explanation. But you're saying, but like anxiety doesn't make me like freak out if I'm in my car and the car door closes. Like that's not what that is, right? And not having the specificity of those symptoms, of understanding those symptoms, makes it feel more vague and unaddressable, you know. But when the doctor says, "Oh, that's called claustrophobia. It's temporary, it's harmless, very, very common, and you will recover." And we will get to a point at sometime in the future, hopefully within the next decade or so, I would imagine, where the awareness of this will become so commonplace that people will have the symptoms that you and I had, Keelan, back in the day, walk into the doctor and the doctor will say, "Oh, that's called depersonalization. It's scary, but it's harmless and temporary. Here's the list of symptoms, just so you know what this is, and here's a plan of action." And just having that conversation, just being pointed in the right direction, and you're not just going around this pinball machine just trying to figure out, I have no idea what's going on. Just being pointed in the right direction takes the edge off it, takes so much of the work off your plate. And just in terms of that's really interesting about your therapist as well, Keelan. Did they have any opinions about like how it's not as well known in the medical community?
I don't think we really got into that. I was just sort of telling her about how any sort of doctor, anyone I've spoken to, sort of wasn't really sure on it. But no, I'll have to ask her the next time that I see her again as to why she thinks that. I think maybe it's just like sort of like, you know, a generalized term of just like it's sort of blanketed just as anxiety, which I guess in a way, yes, it is, but it's still like it's one of the more uncomfortable symptoms of anxiety for me anyway. That's what it was, because I didn't understand what exactly it was. But again, as you say, putting a name to it and being like, because if you walk in with heart palpitations, as you say, and the doctor, they're going to be like, right, okay, that's what this is. This is heart palpitations. But the fact that the doctor can't give you a direct answer as to what the way you're feeling is, then it's just going to, in my case, it did anyway, just spiral into thinking that the doctor doesn't want to speak to me. You know, he's fobbing me off. He's giving me tablets for no reason and things like that. But yeah, man, I mean, hopefully that's the case in the next decade, as you say, you know.
Yeah. So, Keelan, what do you believe is the biggest reason that people stay stuck in depersonalization, and how did you break free from that?
I think very early on, I noticed that my depersonalization and dissociation and things got a lot better after I had a couple of drinks. And I noticed very early on that was a slippery slope to get down. So I think like negative coping mechanisms would be a very bad thing to start to incorporate. Thankfully, and like I know like maybe like in another time, if I had noticed that, I would start to drink a little bit more to sort of get relief from it. But thankfully, I realized that no, look, this is going down a very slippery slope here. But doing things in a beneficial term that make you feel better, like I know we mentioned it before, but the likes of the gym, or if that doesn't have to be that, it's just sort of it could be like a hobby or anything like that. Find something that you really enjoy doing that keeps your mind occupied. For me, it was either the gym or whether it's playing video games or you know things like that, or even taking the dog for a walk. I find when I do that, my mind sort of eases a little bit, you know, if you're listening to music or a podcast, anything to sort of keep your mind off of the rumination and off of the overthinking will give it that little sort of breathing space that it needs. And then once you do that, and once you continue to do that, you'll find yourself into another habit, but thankfully a good habit if you're keeping at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Negative coping mechanisms, I think, are something that everyone has to deal with to some degree or another, because we find these things, like even researching, like going on the forums, even though they just prolong the condition, when you're on them, especially if there's a question, a specific symptom that you want answers on immediately, you can get a sense of relief from just talking to people and finding someone else who has had something similar, or that maybe even that specific symptom. But that can then just keep going indefinitely, and you're just always on the forums. You're always asking for getting more and more specific, asking more and more questions, comparing and contrasting symptoms with other people. Also, the most the most basic kind of coping mechanism is just avoiding things. So, like, I mean, as we were saying earlier, like for me, it was just like, well, I feel afraid to drive, so I just won't drive anymore. And that's how I cope with it. And I justified that to myself by saying, well, that's the safer option, because it could be dangerous for me to drive the car. But then that just went on for months and months, and I was stuck at home, and I didn't want to go outside anyway. But you create these coping mechanisms, in environmental coping mechanisms as well, that feel like they're keeping the anxiety at bay. But what they're actually doing is keeping your recovery at bay, because you're avoiding doing the normal day-to-day things that communicate to your brain that anxiety doesn't need to be there. And this is a cycle that, like, people get into for sometimes a long time. In my case, the bones of 2 years. As for some people, it's a week or two, and they just, like, they have to get back to work. They push themselves out of it, trial and error, whatever. But certainly negative coping mechanisms can be a relief at the start, but long term not a solution.
Yeah, I think just on those on the forums as well. I remember whenever I started the first bit on them, I tried to search for almost like a cure, like a supplement or things like that. And man, I ended up buying the stupidest things ever. Like this, like you would see stuff like people put up like this thing about, I don't know, like one of the ones was like fish oil and stuff to try and like help that. And some people were saying like cured them, and like it cured your DPDR, and 99% of it doesn't do a thing, to be completely honest. The one thing that I did find that actually helped me was like taking magnesium just before bed. I found it helped me keep it sleep a little bit easier. But yeah, there's lots of like false promises and things like that. You would find that like people say that like, they've found this that cures it, and it's like it's just not that.
Yeah, we really get into this idea that there's some combination of things out there. So if I take this specific supplement, this specific vitamin, and I do this specific thing, it's like a Rubik's Cube. And once everything clicks into place, then I'll wake up the next morning and everything is gone, and everything is completely back to normal. But all that does, I mean, that's not going to work, because you're training yourself out of a habit. So you have to give yourself, I mean, you can get rid of this 100%, but you have to give yourself the time and the space for that habitual change to take place. When we get into this thing of saying, well, what if I tried this supplement and this, and I tried this combination of things and check to see did that work? What we're doing is telling ourselves to keep checking what we do. So every day you wake up. So what I would do is, like, I would try something. I would find something I found on the internet. I would try it for a couple of days, and I'd wake up on the fourth morning and go, is it there? Is it still there? And of course it was still there. And I go, okay, it isn't working, back to the drawing board. So back to more research. And this went on for months, or the bones 2 years. And what we train ourselves to do in recovery is to stop checking. It's the checking that is keeping this going. It feels deeply counterintuitive to stop checking on something that feels like an emergency, to stop researching and constantly talking about something that feels like a literal emergency that's going on in your brain. But the reason it feels like an emergency is because we keep feeding it this focus that tells your brain it's important, and we train ourselves away from that. We don't try these like immediate fixes and check to see did that work, because it's the checking that is the problem.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think what I found was just I was trying to find like sort of a quick fix, and it was sort of me being almost stubborn that I realized there wasn't a quick fix, but I still tried to find one anyway. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
yeah, just this is the way my brain used to work. But I mean, if you do find like I don't know, like say like the one thing that works for me is for magnesium, like if I'm lying on the bed. But if you do find something that does help you sort of calm down, that is healthy, then crack on with it. But man, I was spending like hundreds of pounds a month on stupid stuff that I didn't need. You know what I mean? So yeah, I wish I could get that money back, but not gonna happen.
Oh, the amount. I mean, I tried anything and everything under the sun. I tried Reiki at one point. I went to so many different practitioners and different, all these different approaches because I just had no idea what like like trying Reiki for me was like as good as trying brain surgery. Like I because I just didn't know what this was. I had no idea how to even start addressing it. So I was just throwing darts like and seeing, will this work? Will this work? Will that work?
Yeah.
I remember going. God, I remember going to like a health shop in town where I lived and just like describing my symptoms. And the woman, God love her, she hugged me. God, even thinking about it, I was getting emotional. But like she just had no idea, and she gave me some supplement, and I was like thinking, maybe this will work. And of course, it didn't work. I mean, if you can, and also like if you take supplements that are fulfilling some sort of dietary requirement, or they are like vitamin B supplements or like omega-3 supplements, they're really good. But the mistake that we make again is we think that when we're in DPDR or anxiety, that we think that it's, well, is it did this happen because of my omega-3? Or did this happen because of my vitamin B supplements or whatever? So if I get that and I put this into place, that'll click. Those things are just to create the easiest possible. They're just to smooth the path as best as possible, but you still have to do the work to recover because ultimately you're still training yourself out of one habit of thought and behavior into another. Having a good nutritious diet and any vitamins is a part of that, but it's just a part.
Yeah, yeah. I think a big thing for me as well was trying to sort of limit and cut down on how much like alcohol I would drink. Obviously, Sean, we're Irish, so it's sort of ingrained in our DNA. But and it's hard to turn down a pint again from time to time. But I just noticed early on that if I was having a couple of drinks, I would start to feel a lot better. But then the next day, it was like the heat had been cranked up to 2,000. Like the DP was just so severe when it was hungover that it just it was a net negative, and I noticed that very early on, so it wasn't worth it. But yeah, just don't, for anyone watching, please do not try and do what I did because it just won't help.
Yeah. It can feel a bit better when you've had a few drinks. But no, it's not worth it the next day. I did because I get to a point where I was going out and socializing and I was having like a drink or two, but I just had to make absolutely sure that I wasn't hungover the next day. And then I was able to manage it and find that balance. But yeah, hangovers, anxiety with an anxiety-based condition is brutal. It is brutal. Yeah.
It's just an explosion. Yeah.
Yeah. Keelan, what's the when you realized that the depersonalization was gone, what's the first thing you did? Or was there even something like that in the recovery?
I wish I could say that, I sort of jumped up and started to do star jumps and all this here. And it was very, very it was as Hollywood as that. I mean, I sort of remember just being at work and I just realized I was like, here, I haven't felt like this in a week or two. I haven't thought about it in a week or two. And I was like, brilliant. This must be what it feels like. There isn't sort of like a moment where you wake up and it's sort of, you're bouncing out of bed and things like that. It's just not that. It's just, you sort of, for me anyway, you sort of slowly and quietly slip back into the normality of things that you just sort of catch yourself then and say, here, this is happening, it was beautiful. It really, really was. yeah, that's it. I wish there was some sort of big, you know, as I said, Hollywood moment where I could say that. But yeah, it was just sort of very, very gradual and very nice.
You did belt out some Celine Dion tunes, no?
No, 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 no. I think I had a sore throat that day from singing the day before.
Hop up on the desk and bang out thing, or bang out that think twice, you know.
No, I'll maybe have to have a few Guinness before I consider it.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean, and this is the thing is that like but the nature of recovery is that it happens in the background, and because you've trained yourself out of the habit of checking on it, which is what kept it going, the fact that you're now not checking on it means that you'll just get to a point one day when you're doing something else and you say to yourself, oh, it's not there. Wow, okay, that's great. That's great. And but like the thing is that again, at that stage you're so conditioned to not think about it, and you're contextualizing it as something that's not that important anyway, that you just kind of get back to doing what you're doing. Like, you know, and as you're saying, Keelan, like when you realize that, like, I mean, I'm sure you had a moment of joy, like, but I mean, presumably you just had to get back to work, like, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally, like the way that it worked. I remember in the place I used to work, there was this like little small window in one of the floors, and looking out on it, I remember when I was going through like severe, like it was severely dissociated, and I looked at, and it looked like do an old like Windows XP loading screen of like the mountain with the blue sky. It's like green mountain
Yeah.
with the blue sky and the clouds.
Yes.
It looked exactly like that. And I looked at it for days and days, well, obviously completely dissociated. And then I remember when I was, back into recovery and stuff, I was feeling good. And then I looked at it and it looked a lot more normal. It looked a lot more real than it did before then. And I was like, there you go. I'm not looking at a Windows XP loading screen anymore. It was a wallpaper, I think. But it looked exactly like that. It was freaky. And thinking before as well, like my vision, I remember like if I was looking at a road, like down like a street, it felt like I could see a lot more of the road when I was dissociated. Like it looked, because obviously when your pupils sort of dilate and things, you take a lot more in. And then whenever I go back to that same road now, it just looks normal to me. And that's very good. It's one of the main sort of symptoms that I first noticed when I was dissociated about that vision. And then now it just looks, completely bog standard to me now. But yeah,
Bog standard.
bog standard.
Just
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a very good road anyway.
Yeah.
Not a lot of nice shops on it, but yeah.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean though. And this is the thing is like because you look out over like landscape. I remember like looking out over like the McGillicuddy Reeks, which is mountains in Kerry. For people not for all our non-Irish viewers, the McGillicuddy Reeks. But like looking out over the mountains of Cork and Kerry, Kerry, and it just looked completely unreal. Like it looked like an illustration, or as you said, like the background from a loading screen or something. And I was just thinking, like, my vision is damaged. And as you said, as we talked about in the last interview as well, like going to like eye doctors and trying to get that fixed. And then when the optometrist said like there's nothing wrong with your vision, I was like, okay, well there's something wrong with my visual cortex and my brain. So because this is not normal, how do I fix it? And then like looking at it and thinking like, what is it? Trying to examine it and understand it. And then when you recover and your visual cortex or your visuals are not as what's the word I'm looking for?
Pronounced almost.
Your vision isn't on high alert anymore because your fight or flight system has been turned down. You're not as hyper aware of your peripheral vision, and your pupils aren't dilated anymore. And then you look at those same mountains, and you're like, oh wow, those are really cool. Those are beautiful, because it's Kerry, like, but
I was gonna say.
yeah. So lads, come visit Kerry. It's beautiful. but it's that, but it is that thing of like something that you thought you needed to intervene with your vision, something that you thought was wrong with your vision. There was nothing wrong. The worry that you had that there was something that you needed to fix was actually one of the reasons that this continued longer than it needed to. As your anxiety levels reduce and get back to normal, and as your visual hypersensitivity reduces and gets back to normal, your vision gets 100% back to normal. And these worries that you have that like things look unreal or seeing floaters or tracers and things like that, they fade away and stop as if they had never been there. It's it's very kind of anticlimactic, but in a good way.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. It's just sort of just slipping back into the day-to-day life. I just think it's the best way forward. There's not going to be a big, sort of eureka moment, and it's not like that. But it's for me anyway. It was just, realizing that my sort of vision was getting better as well. But yeah, good.
Yeah. And also, and this is something we spoke about just before the interview, Keelan, but, you're doing, like, for someone who had so much trouble with the idea of, like, moving around and traveling, and for someone, and this happened to you when you were abroad,
Mm-hmm.
and now with having recovered and with a couple of years of it behind you, you travel regularly for your job.
Yeah, so this year I was I flew over to Manchester and into Birmingham within the same month. So it was 4 flights sort of consecutively in a row. Whereas if you told me that 2 years ago, I would have been like, there's not a mission. I'm doing that, not a chance. Whereas now I sort of just went like, you know what it is? I'm going to do this because I know when I get back, I'll feel better about myself for having to actually do it and then proving to myself, it was like a little milestone, like a little goal that was achieved, to prove to myself that I can actually do that. Um, but yeah, I don't know, for other people, it's just probably run of the mill about, getting on a plane and getting over there. But when you've been through what I've been through and stuff, and like, you're not even thinking that you're going to be able to drive in a car again or even, walk out of your house without feeling weird. To do that, and then hopefully touch wood be able to do it in the future is a blessing. It's really, really good. So yeah.
Yeah. So traveling, doing well at your job, bought a house, we're flying. You're absolutely flying.
It's crazy, man. It's when I sort of look back in things of how life is sort of panned out. I remember when I came out of uni, it wasn't sort of like a 5-year plan. So I think I came out of uni like 2019, just before COVID and stuff. And I remember I said I wanted to own the car that I currently own. I wanted to work in the place that I currently work now. And I think was that the goal was to move out as well and get my own place. And I've done all three of them. Meanwhile, in the middle of that, going through an anxiety-based condition of DPDR, and I'm getting over that as well. Which again, I don't like to get spiritual and things like that because I'm not the most spiritual sort of person, but I think that experience was brought to me for a reason to sort of almost make it so it sort of changes me for the better and makes me more able to do this and more able to succeed and things like that. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to the next 5 years, mate, because having seen DPDR in the rearview mirror and when I'm singing Celine Dion in the rearview mirror as well, it's just good, man. It is really, really good. And yeah, I would just like to say as well, mate, thank you very much for, I religiously watched the videos there whenever I was going through everything. And they were really like a godsend for me too. And the manual as well, which sort of just helped me cross the finish line in terms of recovery. So again, mate, I would just like to say thanks for everything that you're doing and everything that you have done.
I'm so happy to hear it, man. That's yeah. I'm thrilled that the material was helpful in your recovery. Keelan, it's been so great to chat to you again, man. And yeah, great crack as well. And but I'm just thrilled. Yeah, as always. But I'm just thrilled to see that things are going so well for you, and also, for people watching the channel, and just the constant question is, yeah, but like, can I really recover? Can I really get back to, I mean, long term, can I get back to normal? And this is just, more and more proof that, like, not only can you do that, but like you can go on to do whatever you want to do and get like the house, the job, the car. It's all there, and nothing is holding you back from you. There's no strings attached to recovery. There's no asterisk. There's no small print. It's recovery.
Yeah, I think just on like a sort of closing note as well, the one thing that I've sort of taken out from all of this is to never say no to something out of fear or anxiety. That's sort of now like a sort of mantra that I've implemented into my life. So whether it be the likes of, going out for like, a dinner or something like that and being like, no, I don't really like that sort of neck of the woods, I don't like that food, or even something as small and trivial as that. If I'm not really up for it, I'll go just to put that to bed. Or if it comes to, I know we're talking about it again, like about the gym. If I'm like thinking like, oh, I'm feeling tired, sluggish, I'm not well, I'll try and get something at least done to that. Um, to sort of prove myself wrong. So I think that's the main thing that I brought out of that. But yeah, I just hope everybody's recovery goes well, because take it from me, because I never thought I would. But once I started not doing the negative coping mechanisms, or not our negative recovery tools, I was doing the positive things, and really, really trying to look after myself, then the results just came with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, it's been so great to chat to you again. Thank you for being on the channel, and I know there's going to be people watching this who find your story absolutely inspirational. So it's been a real pleasure, man, and best of luck with everything moving forward. And yeah, keep up the good work, man.
Been a pleasure, Sean. Thank you so much for having me back on.
Yeah, cheers, buddy. All right, take care, man. Bye bye.
See you, man.